So this is one way of escaping the socio-economic trap. The more I do Plog Vlog, the more videos I create, and the more that Plog Vlog becomes a me thing rather than a Trinity and I thing. I've come to realize that for me, Plog Vlog is a search for wisdom, a search for understanding what it is to live a life that we feel is worth living, or I feel is worth living. Let's do some episodes on that. Let's explore the concept of what it means to be seeking wisdom in a modern world. In a previous video, the first one about the loneliness pandemic, I posited that maybe wisdom is simply the doing less stupid shit than the average person. I could be completely wrong about that. So, this first episode, I'm simply going to ask, is wisdom just doing less stupid shit than average? How you doing? Good. If we're going to do this examination of wisdom through the perspective of how much stupid shit a person does on average, we really need to define what is stupid and what is shit. Let's start with the stupid thing. Let's go really simple with that. And what we'll do is we'll look at stupid as being the age-old definition of making mistakes over and over again. So that's our definition of stupid, making mistakes over and over again. Now, the shit bit. This is where we can actually define our scope, I think. So I'm going to narrow the scope of shit to be stuff that people do that is damaging to them. Let's stick to that as our definition and our scope. Just for this one. We might expand it later. So what we've got stupid means doing the shit over and over again. And the shit is stuff that is damaging to you. So doing things that are damaging to you over and over again. Think we got it. Let's go down that path. We can examine it that way.
I'm Trinity Anderson, the editor, fact checker, and this helium-kicking old man's foster daughter. What he's describing, as he wanders through the debris, is essentially a layman's approach to harm reduction and the concept of cognitive behavioural loops, a way of filtering out self-destructive habits to reach a baseline of wise living. Filming Plog Vlog gives him opportunities to explore these ideas and provides a place for me to tell my mother's story. He'll be back after my intermission tale to further unpack whether wisdom really is just doing less stupid shit. It was way back in September of 1993 in Africa. On the dusty road towards Lusaka in Zambia, the Overland expedition faced a new psychological hurdle when the heavy truck rolled through a government Tsetse fly control post. The stark warning signs about African sleeping sickness triggered an immediate consuming paranoia, particularly for my mother Liz and her tent mate Mark. For the young English police recruit who was already profoundly intimidated by the raw reality of the continent, the invisible threat of a fatal parasite was almost too much to handle. Liz's diary reveals that the two of them spent the next 48 hours in a state of exhausting hyper-vigilance. Every harmless housefly, every buzzing mosquito, and every shadow flitting across the canvas of the truck was frantically swatted at, instantly declared to be a deadly Tsetse fly. Their anxious, swatting frenzy stood in stark contrast to the grim reality outside the truck. David, having days earlier been permanently exiled from his tent by a jealous Claire, was completely indifferent to the insect threat. He was still stubbornly sleeping on the hard African dirt in his clothes every night. To survive the plunging nighttime temperatures, David had developed a gritty routine. He would carefully cover the glowing embers of the cooking fire with a thick layer of sand, then curl up directly next to it to soak in the fading radiant warmth. He was far too exhausted by the cold to worry about a bug bite. But Liz and Mark's relentless paranoia wasn't entirely misplaced. Just as they finally began to relax, their anxiety was sharply validated. With a loud, aggressive buzz, a genuine, unnervingly large Tsetse fly weaved in and out between the legs of the dusty adventure tourists sitting in the back of the truck. It was a stark reminder that in Africa, sometimes the things you are paranoid about are actually there.
The research has revealed a gem, and it's called via negativa. What it is, it's the process of seeking wisdom and a better life through removing negative things, through removing the things that we are doing in our life that are detracting from it. I've added something to that, and that is via negativa by proxy. I'll talk about that more later, but it's basically observational learning by looking at what others are doing, what's damaging them, and then not doing that thing in the first place. Let's talk about that more later. I just hit the horn. What a doofus. And I just put it in neutral rather than first. What a doofus. There's a thing called the escapism trap. And what that is that people seek escape from their less than satisfactory lives by doing maladaptive behaviors, doing things that give them a temporary respite from a life that they're really just not finding satisfactory. And because some people make money from those maladaptive behaviors, society actually ends up encouraging those maladaptive behaviors. So via negativa would say to us that a way out of that, a way of seeking wisdom, is to actually subtract those maladaptive behaviors first. The first bit we'll get into later. I'm going to tell you a bit about myself. My parents did a lot of maladaptive behaviors, and I could see what they were doing my whole life. I realized when I was 9 years old that I never wanted to be like them. I could see their trajectory. I could see where they were heading, and that trajectory ended up being true. They both died really early. So that defined in my head a few of the really maladaptive behaviors that I didn't want to do myself. So via negativa by proxy. It's also called vicarious learning. Did I just go through a red light? I hope I didn't. Let's let these people go past first. There we go, green. It's as green as I've ever seen. I don't think I want to turn down there. Let's walk back. We'll walk back for that bottle. Let's take the keys with me because it's a fair distance, and I'll check my notes along the way. Let's look at the maladaptive loop. The maladaptive loop is where people keep falling back into those maladaptive behaviors. So what happens is that they get the escapism from doing the maladaptive behavior, and then they get a slight respite that we talked about before. But that goes away. And then the life becomes less than satisfactory again. So they do the same maladaptive behavior, and that maladaptive behavior is sold to them by society and businesses. They get the respite, the dopamine fix, all of those neurotransmitter things that actually make them temporarily happier, like this. And let's put that down like that. That keeps that maladaptive cycle going. That maladaptive cycle, that loop, is what I talked about at the start as the definition of stupid. It is why people keep doing those stupid things over and over and over again. They're stuck in that loop. So the seeking of wisdom might be about knowing how to break that loop through the removal of those negative behaviors. There was a really successful man called Charlie Munger, and he posited that being successful in life isn't about being spectacularly smart or reaching for those high goals. What he proposed is that the way to be successful is to look for the things that are most likely to have catastrophic outcomes. Good morning, sir. How are you? Have a good one. So he looked for those catastrophic outcomes and he removed those from his life, and he ended up becoming like incredibly rich. The thing is though, is that if you remove all those negative things from your life, do you end up with just a satisfactory life? Are you never striving for those big things? I propose, and this is in the literature as well, is that via negativa is your first step. So it creates the baseline, it creates the structure from which you then strive from. So you're not constantly fighting against those negative behaviors while you're trying to excel. My bin is full and containers for change isn't open yet. So let's talk about what I propose to be part of a potential solution to that baseline. Like, let's say you've done the via negativa, you've got rid of most of the negative stuff, and you're then wanting to strive upwards, or at least not go down. Let's talk about me, because I don't want to go down. I'm not really looking at going up too much. I'm happy with my life. So let's say, this is what I'm proposing, that people have, or I have, a set of minimal acceptable competencies. So you've got rid of most of those negative maladaptive behaviors, and you just want to live a good life. You don't necessarily want to massively excel. So let's say you define, and I've done this, you define those different aspects of your life, physical, mental, working, like living with, social. You define those things in your life and you say, these are the minimal acceptable situations in each of these that I'm prepared to accept in my life. For example, for me, one of the minimal things is strength. I want a minimum amount of strength to be able to do these things in my life. If this bike falls over, I want to be able to pick it up. I used to be very much into powerlifting and deadlifting. So deadlifting is like where you lift up a heavy bar like this. And I've mentioned in a previous episode, I once unofficially broke an Australian record doing that. To keep doing that, to keep striving and excelling, I'm taking a risk. I'm taking a risk that I might cause myself a hernia, lower back damage, because it's so close to my limit, especially as I'm getting older. So I chose a weight to deadlift with that I've decided is my minimal acceptable competency for deadlift. And that allows me to have the strength to lift this bike up if I drop it. It was here somewhere. Where was it? There it is. Apparently this one is officially the beer for up here. Up here means Queensland. We are up in the northern part of Australia. Not that north, sort of like middle north. But it goes all the way to the top of north, which I guess means up here.
My foster father's reference to Charlie Munger's strategy is spot on. It's a classic application of inversion thinking, solving problems by avoiding the worst possible outcomes rather than chasing the best ones. In psychology, Munger's idea of a maladaptive loop aligns closely with operant conditioning, where short-term dopamine relief reinforces long-term destructive habits. The solution my foster father proposed, establishing minimum acceptable competencies, simply creates a sustainable physiological and psychological baseline. In short, his idea is that true wisdom isn't necessarily about striving for constant, spectacular success. It's often found in the disciplined removal of the things that actively damage us.
Hey, they're your bikes down there?
Yeah.
Yeah? The lowrider one. What CC is that?
500.
500? Holy cow. I'm not man enough for that. This is a 125. I'd be off it in a moment. You must be better than me. Have a good one.
You too.
See ya.
By observing the mistakes of others and defining our own acceptable baselines, we can break maladaptive loops before they destroy our foundation. Perhaps your tiny action for today could be to identify one minor, repetitive habit you have that offers temporary relief but causes long-term frustration, or perhaps even sends you towards a frightening trajectory, and consciously disrupt it just once this week. Speaking of disruptions, you can see the next episode is on the left of the screen now, and our compilations, as always, are on the right. And please, pick up 5.